Thank you, John. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Let's try that again. Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Thank you so much. My name is Tuli. My pronouns are she, hers, and I'm proud to be a member of your lead ministry team as well as the lead for programs for kids and youth. Welcome to Beacon, everybody. If you're joining us online, please won't you take a moment to introduce yourselves and say hi to one another. If you're here with us, can you look around and also say an actual hi, not a virtual hi? There we go. Thank you so much. Our services this morning come to you from the original and continued lands of the Lenni Lenape. If you want to find out more about why we do a land acknowledgement and also about our congregation, you should meet somebody from the welcome team. I forgot to ask who it would be. Suzanne, would you come in, please, for a second, all the way up here, please? Come on in. You would meet Suzanne right here in front of our candle lighting table for a welcome tour. Thank you, Suzanne. Thank you for doing that. Excellent. Thank you. And then the second important thing that you need to do is join us for our Beacon Cafe, which is going to be upstairs in the Bamba balcony. Sometimes I'm a little unsure as to what's happening where in the building, so it's always good to check so you don't go wandering.
And if you go upstairs and it's not there,
go wander. Follow the smell and you will find coffee somewhere. It is a great joy to see you all bright and shining this morning. Lots of little beacons here, and we're going to hear more about that a little bit later. It is time to read our congregational covenant. All of you should have a copy. If you are not reading yet, I would invite your big people who hopefully know how to read to run their fingers along the words as we read together. Ready? Love guides this congregation. Love calls us daily to acts of liberation grounded in anti-racism. We affirm that we live in the complexity of intersectionality and that building healthy and loving relationships is a spiritual practice requiring both inward and outward focus. Thus, we covenant to listen deeply, speak compassionately, express gratitude, and embrace our unique diversity. We endeavor to communicate honestly and with compassion, particularly when we are in conflict. When we hurt one another, we will try to make amends, forgive, and reconnect with an intent to repair, change, and grow. Our purpose is to be radically inclusive, feed the human spirit, and heal the world. In celebration of the common purpose that unites us, and with the aspiration of beloved community before us, we will do our best to abide by this covenant. Thank you all.
Good morning. My name is Wim Sweldens, and I am your worship associate today. I use the pronouns he, him. If any of you are ever interested in being a worship associate, just let me know or contact Robin or Emilie. We'll love to have you. I will next read our chalice lighting, which is written by Bell Hooks. The light of love is always in us, no matter how cold the flame. It is always present, waiting for the spark to ignite, waiting for the heart to awaken and call us back to the first memory of being, the life force inside a dark place waiting to be born.
Good morning. My name is Misa Iwama. I'm the Director of Music Ministry, and I'm so happy to be here this morning with you, with John O'Neill, the pianist, and our AV team of Samir and Will. And our first hymn of the day is number 34, Though I May Speak with Bravest Fire. And And I invite you to stand in body or spirit and join in singing. Though I may speak with bravest fire and have not gift to all inspire and have not love, my words are vain as sounding brass and hopeless gain. Though I may give all I possess and striving so my love profess, but not be given by love within, the prophet soon turns strangely thin. Come, Spirit, come, our hearts control, our spirits long to be made whole. Let inward love guide every deed. By this we worship and are free.
January 15th, my friends, whose birthday are we celebrating? Thank you. And there are some others who might have birthdays, so we celebrate you all as well. So I want to tell you a story about the birth of the world, the birthday of the world. It was a story told to a young girl named Rachel by her grandfather. He was her favorite person in the world. Emilie, do you have a favorite person in the world?
I do.
And?
It's you.
Right back at ya. Rachel's grandfather called her by a special name, Nashumale. Can you say Nashumale? Nashumale, which means little beloved soul. Not unlike what we call each other here in service. Hello, beloveds.
Hello, beloved.
Can you say that again?
Hello, beloved.
There we go. Her grandfather knew many, many stories. When she was 4, Rachel's grandfather told her an old story about the birthday of the world. Emilie, you know the story too, right?
I do.
Would you help me tell it?
Absolutely. It's one of my favorites, just like you. In the beginning, there was only darkness, not unlike a January in New Jersey. Now, I have to say, the weather didn't work with me today because it is gorgeous today, but it has been a week of dreariness, so we remember. But at that time, it was even darker. Can you imagine that? It's in the darkness that things get ready to be born. Did you know that? In the darkness, things get ready to be born. For in that darkness, there came a great ray of light, like what's coming through the windows here in this sanctuary. And that light joined the darkness, and the world was born. Darkness and light living together. When the dark and the light come together, that's when unexpected things occur. Because the light broke into millions and millions of sparks. And these sparks fell everywhere. They fell on you, they fell on me. I mean, we weren't there. But the people who were, the things that were, the creations that were, the sparks fell on everything. And they continue to fall. They are still here today. But the sparks are hidden in everyone and everything. And that's why we're born, Thule. Did you know that?
Because the spark needs to come out.
Because we have to find, we have to find one another's sparks that are hidden. right? Because that way we can become friends with the spark. That's why you're my favorite, and that's why you're my favorite, because we have found the sparks in one another, and we help them grow bigger and shine like a beacon.
Wait, is that how we got our name?
I think it played a role. I do. I think it played a role. It's me.
It's you.
It's me. The thing, though, is that it's important that we find the sparks of light so they aren't hidden or trapped. And I have to tell you that it's in months like January where I feel like my spark is hidden. It's trapped, right? But we have to do that one spark at a time. And so when Rachel's grandfather told her this story, she asked him, how can we find the sparks if we cannot see them? Tuli, how do you think we find them if we can't see them with our eyes?
So it's not like seeing with your eyes, right? But
Yeah.
when you see with your heart, what do you think? Can you see with your heart? Yeah? How do you end up seeing with your heart? You feel it,
Yeah.
right? Like you really have to feel it here. Yes. So Rachel's grandfather answered that we cannot see them with our eyes. We can only see them with our hearts. That means you got to feel something. Only our hearts can see the spark of light hidden in everything and in everyone. What's interesting is that when you see with your heart for another spark, you can help that spark grow. And your own spark grows bigger and shines brighter. Isn't that amazing?
It is kind of amazing. And so today we celebrate Dr. King's birthday, and we call him Dr. King because he was a doctor of the heart. He really did help reminding people that they had a spark within them, no matter what the world said about you, and that you needed to help that shine in one another. And that's why we honor him and celebrate his birthday every year. It's not just a celebration, it's a commitment that we will do like he did and find the sparks with our hearts that are hidden in everybody.
So let's renew our promise to
Yeah.
find the spark. Here ends our story for all ages.
Good morning.
I'm Jeannie Siegel, and I am a chaplain here at Beacon, she, her. Beacon chaplains extend the spiritual care of our community, and one of the rituals of our spiritual care is our community candle lighting, at which time we light candles of joy and of sorrow and of gratitude. This morning, we light a candle of honor and celebration of Dr. King and those who supported him and those who carry on his ministry. Today, we light a candle of sorrow for all those people in California dealing with the floods and the rain and the tragic loss of life from the storms that blanket that state. Today, we light a candle of joy for the birth of Emilie Sage Ebert to proud parents, Mara and Jody Ebert, and brothers Parker and Xander. And we light another candle of joy for the dedication and naming of Kai and Keel Tyler Garibaldi, children of Lindsay and Jeff Tyler Garibaldi. And we light a candle for some January birthdays, and those of you who have January birthdays, feel free to snap your fingers. Oh, got some. And we're going to call some out. So we're going to light a candle for Frederica and Terrell, children of Erica Malinowski and Michael Oruga, in the room. And a candle for Henry McCain, who turned 17. Best of luck on the driver's exam, Henry. For this and so much more, we invite you now to come forward and light a candle here in our sanctuary, or at your home, or anywhere you are.
Would you please join in singing hymn 169, We Shall Overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome. We shall overcome someday.
So this morning for our meditation, we are going to follow in the tradition of Reverend Howard Thurman, a pastor, an American pastor and mystic of African descent. And our meditation this morning is going to improvise silence as we improvise words. Reverend Thurman and his congregation witnessed that when they held silence in his congregation, that the pastoral need of the congregation actually went down. More like when they had silence, fewer and fewer people were coming to him because they had the silence to hold them. It was a moment of release. So today, silence will be our meditation form, shape, and flow. And I will warn you, I can hear the inner already. Silence is not easy. It's not comfortable, but you are not alone in it. We together can sit in some moments of discomfort and also in the moment of release that silence gives us. And there will be words, so I will be needing your help in saying a few words. So I will begin with a few words just to open us up, followed by some periods of short and long silences. The twins, I'm sure, will fill the silence. But whether you're here in this room or online, I invite you to begin saying out loud what you hear, both the sounds of the world, but also what is in your heart. And I invite our folks who are online to join in, to stop whatever multitasking you are doing right now. It takes one to know one, and to speak aloud or to write in the chat. So let us begin. I invite you into a posture of listening, taking a deep breath. Holy mystery, breath of life, we begin to hear the sound of people passing in their cars. We hear the sounds of babies cooing and speaking their language. We hear the sound of floorboards creaking, the ancestors calling, we were once here. We hear the chairs around us, the people around us breathing. What do you hear? I hear, don't be afraid. I am always with you. I hear, reach out. Do the thing that you feel you cannot do. What do you hear, beloved? I hear a jet in the sky. And if I listen closely, I can hear the clouds passing the wind blowing. I can hear sunshine. In the silence, I can hear a song forming. I can feel a wholeness returning. And then I hear the sigh within. Take a sigh with me. That sigh is the song of the genuine, calling to us. Ashe, and so may it be.
We're going to sing Precious Lord, which is number 199 in your hymnals, and I invite you to stay seated for this. This hymn was written by Thomas Dorsey, who is a blues and gospel musician, and he wrote it in a time of great personal tragedy. Thomas Dorsey knew Mahalia Jackson, who made this song famous with her beautiful performances. And Martin Luther King also knew Mahalia Jackson. The last thing Dr. King said before he was assassinated was that he would like to have this song sung later that evening. And Mahalia Jackson sang it at his funeral. Precious Lord, take my hand, lead me on, let me stand. I am tired, I am weak, I am worn. Through the storm, through the night, lead me on to the light. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home. When my way grows drear, precious Lord, linger near. When my life is almost gone, hear me cry, hear my call. Hold my hand, lest I fall. Take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home. When the darkness appears and the night draws near, and the day is past and gone, at the river I stand. Guide my feet, hold my hand, take my hand, precious Lord, lead me home.
Good morning. We have two readings today. The first reading is from Dr. King, and the second reading is from Bell Hooks, the same person who wrote our chalice lighting earlier in the service. The reading of Dr. King is on the concept of agape. Now, if you don't know what that means, don't worry, because when I read it first, I had no idea what it meant, and I'd never heard it. Turns out it's a Greek word for love, and the reading actually explains exactly what it is. Now, note in the words of Dr. King, he does use gender-specific words like man and he. Today, those words we would consider to be gender-exclusive language. Now, I think it's obvious to everybody that Dr. King's life, his theology, his work, his writings were all about inclusion. And if he will write it today, his language will probably be a little different and more accurately include would more accurately reflect this inclusivity. There we go. At the center of nonviolence stands the principle of love. In speaking of love, we are not referring to sentimental or affectionate emotion. It would be nonsense to urge men to love their oppressors in an affectionate sense. We speak of love, which is expressed in the Greek word agape. Agape means understanding, redeeming goodwill for all men. It is an overflowing love, which is purely spontaneous, unmotivated, groundless, and creative. It is not set in motion by any quality or function of its object. It is the love of God operating in the human heart. Agape does not begin by discriminating between worthy and unworthy people or any quality people possess. It begins by loving others for their sakes. It springs from the need of the other person, his need for belonging to the best in the human family. Agape is not a weak, passive love. It is love in final analysis. Agape means a recognition of the fact that all life is interrelated. Whether we call it an unconscious process, an impersonal Brahman, or a personal being of matchless power and infinite love, there is creative force in this universe that works to bring the disconnected aspects of reality into a harmonious whole. The second reading comes from Bell Hooks, and it's from her book, All About Love. Self-love is the foundation of our loving practice. Without it, our other efforts to love fail. Giving ourselves love, we provide our inner being with the opportunity to have the unconditional love we may always have longed to receive from someone else. Whenever we interact with others, the love we give and receive is always necessarily conditional. Although it is not impossible, it is very difficult and rare for us to be able to extend unconditional love to others, largely because we cannot exercise control over the behavior of someone else, and we cannot predict or utterly control our responses to their actions. We can, however, exercise control over our own actions. We can give ourselves the unconditional love that is the grounding for sustained acceptance and affirmation. When we give this precious gift to ourselves, we are able to reach out to others from a place of fulfillment and not from a place of lack. One of the best guides on how to be self-loving is to give ourselves the love we are often dreaming about receiving from others. There was a time when I felt lousy about my over 40 body, saw myself as too fat, too this, or too that. Yet, I fantasized about finding a lover who would give me the gift of being loved as I am. It is silly, isn't it, that I would dream of someone else offering to me the acceptance and affirmation I was withholding from myself. This was a moment where the maxim, "You can never love anyone if you're unable to love yourself," made clear sense. And I add, do not expect to receive the love from someone else you do not give yourself.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Barbara Heisler. I use the pronouns she, her, and I've been a member here for 26 years, or something like that. Over that time, people have come and people have gone, and I've come and I've gone. And a few years ago, I realized I had lost many of my deep connections with people in my faith community. And that's when I was given the opportunity to join a community group. Truth be told, the first year didn't work out because of timing, but I came back the second year and tried again, and I'm glad I did. I've now been with my community group, which has changed with some people coming and some people going, for 3 years. Our membership has stabilized. We meet twice per month on Thursday nights via Zoom with our small cohort. And it's been magical, challenging, and totally worth it. So I'd like to talk a little bit about how our group works. But first, let me ask you to think about this question. How did you learn to listen? Voltaire says that the road to the heart is the ear. Listening to someone means getting out of your own head and trying to understand another person's mind. It's an active and conscious process involving inquiring into the other mind. Listening is one of the most important skills we can have. How well we listen has a major impact on the effectiveness of our lives and on the quality of our relationships with other people. So, for instance, we listen to obtain information, we listen to understand, we listen for enjoyment, we listen to learn. Given all the listening that we do, you'd think we'd be good at it. In fact, most of us aren't. Research suggests that we only remember about 25 to 50% of what we hear. The way to improve your listening skills is to practice active listening. And this is where we make a conscious effort to hear not only the words that another person is saying, but more important, the complete message being communicated. This is a skill that's practiced in community groups. In fact, at least once per night, one of our facilitators will remind us that after we engage in joint readings to prime the pump on our topic that night, that we'll take turns listening as each shares a reflection and why it spoke to them and where it's led them. We're reminded to practice deep listening, maintaining eye contact, and focusing on what's being shared, not on preparing what we'll say. The group listens quietly as each person shares, rather than engaging in crosstalk. When we listen, truly listen to what someone is saying to us, discarding our assumptions and judgments and worry, we're living in the present moment. And we're integrally aware of the possibilities that are now free to arise organically from that exchange. And feeling listened to is incredibly important. It makes us feel we matter. It's the way we tell if we're being respected and taken seriously. So think about it. When was the last time you were really listened to? How did you feel? From our reading this month in our group, when someone deeply listens to you, your bare feet are on the earth, and a beloved land that seemed distant is now at home with you. Well, this is nothing new. In 1941, Brenda Euland published an article titled, "Tell Me More," in the Ladies' Home Journal, about the desirability of listening carefully to children and adults. She believed that most people were not sufficiently mindful of conversational partners. She said, "Because listening is a magnetic and strange thing, a creative force, you can see that when you think how the friends that really listen to us are the ones that we move forward toward. We want to sit in their radius as though it did us good, like ultraviolet rays." And this is the reason. When we are listened to, it creates us, makes us unfold and expand. Ideas actually begin to grow within us and come to life. You know how if a person laughs at your jokes, you become funnier and funnier? And if they don't, even little tiny jokes in you shrivel up and die? Well, that's the same principle. So listening and being listened to matter because we need to be taken seriously. We learn growing up whether ideas and stories are taken seriously or cast aside. We quickly adapt when we realize that someone values what we say and are drawn to them. When we are not heard or our opinions are not taken seriously, we increasingly become frustrated and can shut down. To experience overall well-being, an individual needs to have their thoughts, their perspective, and their opinions heard seriously. We need people to bear witness to our experience. Each of us experiences a unique world that can only be understood through our lens, and the only way we can share our perspective is through communication. Many people find it difficult to share their most vulnerable thoughts and stories, often because in those vulnerable moments, we assess if we're being accepted by others or rejected. A good listener is the witness without judgment or attempting to resolve. And often we have the resolution in ourselves, but just need to communicate outwardly to reflect and take action. A good listener will allow for someone to speak and through reflective questioning, help individuals find their own solutions. So each month, members of our groups receive new small group packets on our monthly themes. And here at Beacon, those themes are tied to our monthly congregational themes. These packets are designed to support our unique approach to small group experience and include spiritual experiences, exercises, questions that encourage reflection on daily living, and we also get additional pages of recommended resources that can help us explore the themes in more depth. The questions are tools for individual exploration and spiritual discernment, but the outcomes don't stop with us individually. Based on the work by Parker Palmer and refined more by Soul Matters and our leadership team, our packets take us on a journey each session. With our knowledgeable and skilled facilitators, my facilitators here, Bettina, this approach has the power to transform individuals, families, workplaces, and communities. It certainly transforms the relationships among participants as we get to know each other in very deep and unique ways. I know that my community group has become a deeply meaningful part of my spiritual practice. It offers the gift of spiritual connection. It offers a sense of belonging and a circle of fellow UUs who support one another's spiritual growth. It encourages me to stretch my spiritual muscle and get out of my own way as I explore the monthly themes. From another of our readings from our packets by David White. Put down the weight of your aloneness and ease into the conversation. The kettle is singing even as it pours you a drink. The cooking pots have left their arrogant aloofness and seen the good at you at last. All the birds and creatures of the world are unutterably themselves. Everything is waiting for you. I invite you to join a community group if this small group ministry appeals to you, and I wish for you a transformative spiritual experience.
I was sitting here saying amen, amen, amen. Our offering this morning will now be given and gratefully received for the work of community groups and all the ministries that make up our mission of radical inclusion, feeding the human spirit, and healing the world. Thank you.
Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Hatred cannot drive out hate. Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Hatred cannot drive out hate. Only love, only love, only love can do that. Only love, only love, only love, only love can do that. Only love, only love, only love, only love can do that. Only love, only love, only love, only love can do that. Only love.
Hello, Beacon. Are you all out there? Are you a little chilly? All right, all right. I'm a little chilly, so I just want to make sure. Marcy's giving me the look. She's chilly. All right. Well, I want you to think of the warmth of July, because way back in July, I shared my intention for sabbatical was to surrender. I told you how much I love that word surrender. I didn't like it at all. But I liked the way that Billy Mark, an interdisciplinary artist, defined surrender. It's all about listening, what Barbara's talking about, listening, but listening to your intuition, listening to that still small voice, and then going out and meeting Spirit halfway. Even if you're uncertain about what it means to do this, even if you're scared about what people will say, should you listen to that still small voice? Well, the Spirit came that first week of sabbatical in the form of Lizzo. Are you with me? Do we have any Lizzo lovers out there? People know who Lizzo is? Please tell me people know who Lizzo is. Okay, fantastic. All right, yes, the singer and the amazing flutist, which, by the way, did any of you see on YouTube or whatever Lizzo play James Madison's crystal flute? Did you all see that? If you haven't, please go and Google it right now, or maybe not right now if you're here, but later on, especially the one where she's playing the flute in the Library of Congress's reading room. It was the most beautiful moment to behold. It made me want to go back in time to the moment that James Madison received that crystal flute and whisper into the ear of this American founder and slave owner, one day a free black woman will be the first person to play that crystal flute. That is what the future looks like, Mr. Madison. I just had that moment, right? And whenever I get despairing about the state of the world, I will close my eyes and recall Lizzo playing that flute. And I think this is worth fighting for. But I digress. We're back in July, that first week of sabbatical. Lizzo's song, To Be Loved, Am I Ready, popped up on almost every Spotify list I played. It was on the radio stations I listened to, and it opens with a word that I have now come to love. Does anybody know what that word is? You obviously weren't listening to it as much as I was. Sheesh. That's the word. That's how she opens, Am I Ready to Be Loved? Sheesh. That might come up a few times. I would open my eyes in the morning and I would hear Lizzo singing in my mind her verse, how am I supposed to love somebody else when I don't like myself? Ooh, ooh. Guess I better learn to like this. Ooh, true. It might take my whole life just to do. Am I ready to be loved? Sheesh. The first lesson of Surrendering Spirit said is to love yourself, is learning to love yourself. And Lizzo rightly asks, are we ready? Are you ready, really, to be loved? On the surface, we might believe that we do, in fact, actually already love ourselves. I would imagine that many of us would say that. Yeah, sure, I like myself. And that was certainly what I thought until my spiritual director assigned me the practice of loving the margins of myself. Now, spiritual directors, I have to tell you, say things like this where you're like, what? What? Right? She turned to me and she said, oh my gosh, this constant striving to be better. Sheesh. Why don't you let love what is in you, what was in you, and what forever shall be? That is where your center lies, Emilie, in loving the margins of yourself. Okay. To find our center, we have to begin loving the margins of ourselves, those parts of ourselves that we like to hide, that we don't like to show publicly, that we try to make ourselves better in this constant self-improvement project. I would say even Beacon as an organization is under a constant self-improvement project. Spiritual teacher Mirabai Starr writes, I have come to realize that it is not our many imperfections that are the problem, but rather our ideas of what perfection is. It's not our attachment to what people think about us that creates suffering. It's not our attachment to what people think about us that creates suffering, but it is our judgment that there is something wrong with and bad about ourselves. That's what creates suffering, according to Mirabai Starr. In other words, she says, we are supposed to work not on being less human, but rather on becoming as fully and deeply human as we possibly can be in any given moment. She's saying we have to love the margins of ourselves. And Bell Hooks in All About Love is saying that that is our spiritual practice. And if you have not read that book, I wish I had read that book 20 years ago. Why was it not on my seminary reading list? I just have to say, get it today. That has to become our spiritual practice. And Dr. King, Bell Hooks' names in that book is a prophet of love. He is our guide. But Dr. King was heavily informed by another prophet. Did you all know that when Dr. King marched, he always carried one book with him? Does anybody have any idea what book that would be? The Bible. That's what you'd think, right? It would be the Bible, right? Maybe the Hebrew and Christian Bibles. It was not. The book he carried was one by his mentor, the Reverend Howard Thurman, and it was called Jesus and the Disinherited. Howard Thurman was born in 1899, born at the end of a century that had known slavery. Thurman's grandmother was enslaved. Born on the cusp of a new century that would know segregation, lynchings, and mass incarceration, Thurman became a mystic, a scholar, a pastor, and yes, a prophet. He wrote the book that Dr. King carried in an attempt to answer a single question posed to him by a young Indian lawyer while he was on a 6-month speaking tour of South Asia in the 1930s. The tour was sponsored by a Christian group, and Reverend Thurman, of course, was speaking as a Christian himself. India at the time was struggling for independence from British colonialism, and the young lawyer asked Reverend Thurman, "What are you doing here? What are you doing here?" Y'all, listen to this. He said to him, "More than 300 years ago, your forefathers were taken from the western coast of Africa as slaves. The people who dealt in the slave traffic were Christians. The men who bought the slaves were Christians. Christian ministers, quoting the Christian apostle Paul, gave the sanction of religion to the system of slavery. And during all that period since emancipation, you have lived in a Christian nation in which you were segregated, lynched, and burned. Even in the church, I understand there is segregation," said this young Indian lawyer. "I am a Hindu," he says. "I do not understand. Here you are in my country, standing deep within the Christian faith and tradition. I do not wish to seem to be rude to you, sir, but I think you are a traitor to all of the darker peoples of the earth. I am wondering what you, an intelligent man, can say in defense of your position as a Christian." Jesus and the Disinherited was Reverend Thurman's answer to the young Indian lawyer, stating why he was a Christian. Jesus, he said, was a poor outsider in his own land. He was living in occupied territory with no civil protection and under a violent and oppressive regime. Jesus was subject to the same temptations as every other disinherited person in any other time who were pursued by what Reverend Thurman calls the three hounds of hell. You gotta love that term, the three hounds of hell: fear, deception, and hatred. The disinherited, ironically, according to Reverend Thurman, could use the hounds of hell as survival tools. For instance, hatred could harden the resolve of the oppressed against overwhelming odds. Hatred could help them face what they had to face. However, says Thurman, cultivating hatred came with a price. Same with fear and deception. It would corrupt your soul. And Reverend Thurman saw that Jesus, in his life, in his ministry, and his death, took another path, and that was the path of love. Like my spiritual director, Jesus invited us to love the margins of ourselves. Not only the margins of ourselves, but when we started to love the margins of ourselves, it invited us to show up for the margins in our society. That's what he said we needed to go for. Jesus blew the concept of neighbor, shifting it from meaning our tribe. That's what neighbor meant at that time. It sometimes means it today, shifting that meaning from those people who are in my tribe, on our block, on this team, to meaning an inextricable relationship with everyone and everything. And Reverend Thurman wrote that we must love our neighbors directly, clearly, and permitting no barriers between us, because he said, the things that we tell ourselves separate us from one another are an illusion. The separateness is an illusion. It is Jesus, as lifted up by Howard Thurman, that gives rise to the nonviolence of the civil rights movement. Dr. King writes, the nonviolent resistor would contend in the struggle for human dignity. The oppressed people of the world must not succumb to the temptations of becoming bitter or indulging in hate campaigns. To retaliate, Dr. King goes on, to retaliate in kind would do nothing but intensify the existence of hate in the universe. Along the way of life, someone must have sense enough and morality enough to cut off that chain of hate. Dr. King, of course, did not mean that the oppressed should not resist the forces of hate. He said resist. Resistance is crucial, but that it has to be rooted, can you guess, in an ethic of love. I have to say that it was Reverend Thurman, as a mystic, who insisted that to struggle against oppressive powers and principalities would require a spiritual reserve. That reservoir of love, it had to be in that center. He would ask, are you ready to be loved? A year before his death in 1981, Reverend Thurman gave a baccalaureate address at Spelman College. As most of you know, Spelman is a historically black college in Atlanta, Georgia, and it is a global leader in educating women of African descent. As many of you are aware, other Georgia colleges in 1881 at Spelman's founding were open only to white men. Not that all colleges are called historically white colleges, although Spelman is called a historically black college. They're just called colleges, right? So it's important to realize the naming around this. So imagine the audience in 1981 as Reverend Thurman is giving this address. Black women in Atlanta who have just earned their degrees. These women are the disinherited in our country. Not unlike Jesus, they had lived as outsiders in their own land, even as the country's greatness was made on the backs of their mothers, their grandmothers, their grandfathers. Here comes Reverend Thurman. And do you know what he says? Almost like in the second paragraph of his speech, he asks, "Who are you? Who are you?" Could you imagine Reverend Thurman coming up to you and saying, "Who are you?" He would ask anyone. If he were here at Beacon Cafe for social hour, he would come up to you and say, "Who are you?" And you'd be like, "I'm Steve Kramer." And he'd be like, "Who are you really?" And you'd be like, "Oh no, I've now got to really answer this question." And it didn't matter how important you are. He asked Jesse Jackson, "Who are you really?" Who is Jesse Jackson? And it didn't matter how lowly you were. If you had just lost your house, if you had just lost your family, he would say, "But who are you really?" He wanted to know what was beyond all of the projections we put out there, beyond our best selves and our good selves, beyond the worst that society has to say about who we really are. But who are you really, he asks. And he asked this question to the Spelman graduates, saying, "There is in every person something that waits and listens for the sound of the genuine in herself. Nobody like you has ever been born, and no one like you will ever be born again. You are the only one. And if you miss the sound of the genuine in you, you will never be able to get a scent on who you are." The graduates thought that they were done with their homework. They had graduated. But Reverend Thurman gives them assignment. Can you find a way to hear, to really listen, as Barbara said, to the sound of the genuine in yourself? Because he says if you can get still enough to hear the sound of the genuine in yourself and follow it, then you can hear the sound of the genuine in others. Rachel Naomi Ramon's grandfather, that mystic, would say that that's the spark of divinity within us, and that we listen with our ears for the song of the genuine. We listen with our hearts. If we can listen with our hearts, says Reverend Thurman, then the wall that separates us and divides us, that illusion, will fall away and we will become one. That's the moment when we give up our false selves. That's when fear melts into nothingness and we know now the song of the genuine. We belong to one another. This is where our center lies. And that's when we, the disinherited and the inherited in our system, have the capacity to reimagine the world because we are grounded in that ethic of love. On Tuesday, I attended my first class on Howard Thurman with a group of spiritual directors, and we listened to his actual voice giving the baccalaureate address, his actual voice calling to us. And that's when a fellow classmate wrote in the chat that she was a member of that graduating class. And on that day, she said she had no idea what he was saying to her. The sound of the genuine? What is this? How do I do this? But what remained was the question. And she kept asking herself that question throughout the course of her life. She became a spiritual director. Who am I? Who am I really? She kept listening for her heart, with her heart, for that song. And y'all, that's when, for me, I made this connection in my mind. Who were these women sitting there listening to Reverend Thurman? They have to be some of the women who led the massive Get Out the Vote campaign in Georgia. They have to be. They and their daughters and their granddaughters. These women spent their whole lives listening to the sound of the genuine. If anyone had cause to despair, to give in to the hounds of hell, it was them, but they did not. They learned to live from an ethic of love. And they have learned to love our country in ways that many of us have fallen away and given in to despair. So this week, in terms of a practice, you know I love giving you homework like Reverend Thurman. I have an assignment for you. I want you to begin loving the margins of your being. The next time you find yourself putting some portion of yourself down, I want you to just take a moment, disrupt that thought, and love that. Love it in you. Love the margins of who you are. Practice that self-love that bell hooks talk about. And today, tomorrow marks the first days of 30 Days of Love from our Side with Love campaign. It runs from MLK Day all the way through to Valentine's Day. And this is not, as in years past, a time for you to do more and more things. In fact, this year, 30 Days of Love is offering us spiritual nourishment. Spiritual nourishment. And so this week in Spark, you click on the Side with Love campaign, and there is a gift for you, some spiritual nourishment for the work of our mission. Try it, click on it, see what appeals to you. It might be a body practice or a blessing or a story. There are things for all of us and our children too. And as you listen, I invite you to listen for the sound of the genuine in you. Beacon, are you ready to be loved? Oh, some of you don't know. Are you ready to be loved? Yes. Are you ready to be loved? Yes. What does Lizzo say? Sheesh. Sheesh. Maybe that's where we say. Maybe that's what we say until we are ready to love ourselves. Maybe that's what we say. Amen. Let this be the sacred ground, and ashe, so may it be.
Would you please stand in body or spirit and join in singing our closing hymn, which is number 100. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got joy. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain in my soul. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain. I've got strength like a mountain in my soul.
You take hands with one another, beloved, and if you're not the type of person who likes to hold hands, just put your hand on your heart. That's okay. Marty, we are up there with you. Everyone at home, we are with you as well. Take a moment just to look at one another. See the spark that is hidden there. See it with your heart. And may it shine brightly this week. Go in peace and love. Are you ready? Sheesh. See you at coffee hour.
you.